Hello, everybody. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start this a little bit early, cause yeah, why not? Um, I found a thing that's replaying some of the old stuff for now until the actual official one comes up. This one, so we'll watch some of the old stuff for a while. There's some neat stuff going on here. So we'll stick with this for a bit. And I'm gonna try not to talk a whole lot. So I'll talk in chat, but verbally, not so much.
Now, if you tuned in yesterday, you noticed that at about 52 seconds before liftoff, our launch director called a hold over the countdown net due to an out-of-family reading on a first stage sensor. Now, we have hundreds of sensors positioned throughout the vehicle on the first stage, second stage, as well as our fairing that help us monitor all kinds of variables from acceleration, pressure, temperature, and numerous other parameters. And while this particular sensor did have a redundancy, the readings it was providing for us were out of tolerance, and so out of an abundance of caution, we opted to hold launch and replace that sensor in question. That replacement has been made, and we are currently go for today's launch. Right now, just coming up on the 5-minute mark here, we are concluding loading on the RP1 onto our first stage. That is, RP1 is refined kerosene. That is one of our propellants for the mission. And we are topping off liquid oxygen as well on that first stage. And we're going to keep topping that off for about 2 more minutes. We're loading over 1.1 million pounds of propellant on the first and second stage combined. Are loaded at this point in the count.
Strongback lower started.
Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center have given us a go for today's launch. No issues to report from the range. We have been keeping our eye on some upper-level winds. As of now, though, looking into the latest balloon readings, we continue to be go for today's launch. We do have a 2-hour launch window. If anything were to come up, we would have the opportunity to potentially recycle and target the end of this launch window. And we do also have a backup launch opportunity tomorrow at the same time.
Cradle arms coming open. AFTS final setup started.
And we have just started pressing up the first stage in preparation for strongback retraction. And you can see actually the forward arms opening just below the payload fairing. And that strongback retracts back 1.5 degrees. And operators have confirmed that the TVC motions are good on our MVAC engine, the second stage engine. TVC being thrust vector control, how we position the engine and guide the stage into orbit.
Stage 1, LOX load, close out.
And GNC verify stage 2 TVC motion nominal.
And we have finished loading liquid oxygen onto stage 1.
Strongback lower is ended, inclination 88.5 degrees.
And the strongback lower has also completed at its 80.5 degree point right now.
Vehicle switching to internal power.
Now coming up in the final few minutes here, in the final 2 minutes, we will have the terminal count auto sequence in the final minute where the flight computer will enter into its startup mode. The final check of all our sensors across the vehicle will occur before we lead into startup. And you'll see the bright green flash at the base of the rocket where our T-tab will ignite and act as the starter for our 9 Merlin engines. Those 9 Merlin engines capable of putting out over 1.7 million pounds of thrust at sea level. And with that, we're going to go silent over here and let you listen into the final 1.5 minutes of today's counts before on time T-0 at 7:15 a.m. Eastern Time.
Vehicles in soft line. Gas closeout started.
FTS announced FTS is ready for launch.
AFTS is ready for launch.
VC verify Falcon 9 is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup. Ground side gas closeout's complete.
LD verify go for launch.
Go for launch. Stage 2 pressing for flight.
T-minus 30. T-minus 20.
Stage 1 pressing for flight.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff at Falcon 9.
Copy, GoPro. Stage 1 propulsion is not. And back engine shell has begun.
And Falcon 9 is delivering the National Reconnaissance Office's satellite to orbit right now. We just transitioned through max Q, and we've begun chilling in the MVAC engine on our second stage. Trajectory is looking good so far. Coming up in about 20 seconds, we'll have main engine cutoff, MECO 1. That's where all 9 Merlin engines of that first stage will shut down, and we'll see stage separation. Stage separation will be actuated by 4 pneumatic actuators on the first stage.
We have MECO.
And we have main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
And stage separation has been confirmed. And you can see the first stage there flipping back. Use the nitrogen thrusters. And
S1 boost back burn.
and the boost back burn of that first stage. This boost back burn will last about another 15 seconds. We use this to reorient the stage back to Cape Canaveral and fly it back from all the forward velocity it had over the Atlantic Ocean. And we also had a successful fairing separation of the second stage. As we mentioned previously, we will not be covering the remainder of the primary mission due to the nature of the classified payload on board, but we are covering our first stage as it's making a landing attempt back at landing zone 1, and that's what you're seeing on your screen right now. On the right side is an onboard camera looking down from our interstage. That stage itself is 12 feet in diameter and over 100 feet tall, so you're looking down the length of that stage, and those grid fins also deployed, those grid fins guiding us back through Earth's atmosphere. On the left side of the screen, you're seeing our assets on ground tracking that rocket, the first stage as it's making its way back. Now that boost back burn was a 3-engine burn. Coming up, we're going to have our entry burn, also a 3-engine burn. The entry burn will happen just after the 7-minute mark. The first stage has passed its apogee. It was over 130 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. Those white puffs you're seeing are those nitrogen thrusters on board, which we also use for controlling the vehicle and a guided descent back to landing zone 1. Entry burn should be coming up in about a minute from now. You'll see 3 engines ignite at the base of the rocket. We use that to slow down all of the vertical velocity as the rocket is now falling back to the Earth's surface and accelerating. Just tuning in, we're watching the first stage as it's falling back to Earth and a guided descent back to landing zone 1. We have an entry burn coming up in about 15 seconds. Engine entry burn. And we've entered the entry burn startup. Ignition of the entry burn. This is a 25-second burn. And we have shutdown, the first stage. About 45 seconds, we'll have our landing burn begin. That landing burn will last about 30 seconds. And then we'll have touchdown of the vehicle. That landing burn is going to take us from going about 1,000 kilometers an hour right down to 0 on the surface of Earth. Landing legs will deploy about 10 seconds before landing. stage has landed back at landing zone 1. Another good day for us at SpaceX. Beautiful sight to see. That is the 4th landing of the Falcon 9 at landing zone 1. With that landing, that's going to conclude our coverage for today's webcast. It is a beautiful sight, certainly, to bring back another first stage. We will be putting that rocket through some inspections and then getting it ready for another launch for a future mission coming up in our very busy manifest for the remainder of the year. So with that, we'd like to thank the National Reconnaissance Office, the range, the FAA, as well as you, the viewer, for tuning in and watching us. If you'd like to keep track of our future missions as well as the progress of this mission, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or check out SpaceX.com. And if you'd like to come up here and join the team and be part of the crew that makes all this happen, check out SpaceX.com/careers. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you again soon.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff of Falcon 9. Good afternoon from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. It is July the 3rd and sunset at our Florida launch site at the Kennedy Space Center. The SpaceX team is preparing for launch of the Falcon 9 in just under 10 minutes from now. Launch is scheduled at 35 minutes after the hour, or 00:35 Universal Time, or 8:35 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Now, I'm John Isbrucker, Falcon 9 Principal Integration Engineer, and I'll be bringing you updates and commentary during today's webcast. Now, this is our 3rd launch attempt in just 10 days. Our first attempt was Bulgaria Sat 1 on June 23rd. Our second launch was Iridium 2 on June 25th. And thanks to the great work by the Cape and Hawthorne ground, vehicle, and payload teams, we're preparing for launch of IntelSat 35e minutes from now. And our first reflown Dragon spacecraft splashed down this morning in the Pacific Ocean in the early morning hours, completing its 31-day trip to the International Space Station. So it's been a great couple of weeks here at SpaceX as we count down to liftoff of IntelSat 35e. We'll be launching in 8.5 minutes from Launch Complex 39A, shown on your monitor. 39A is one of 2 launch complexes on NASA's Kennedy Space Center that were used for launches of the Saturn V in the Apollo program, and then followed up by the 135 Space Shuttle launches. Now, not visible in the typical view, but you can see here at the end of the long ramp is the hangar at the edge of Complex 39A. This hangar houses both Falcon 9s and Falcon Heavy stages. Final integration of the rocket with the spacecraft is also performed in the hangar. From there, we roll the assembled rocket north up the ramp to the crown of the launch pad. You can see the pad is slightly elevated above the surrounding landscape. This allows us to have the large flame bucket underneath to channel the thrust away from the rocket. Now, on the launch pad, we've got 2 facilities, a fixed service structure with the large lightning rod that's on top. You can see it right behind the Falcon 9. And just to the left is the rotating service structure. We're continuing to demolish that this year. It's no longer needed by SpaceX after the Space Shuttle program. On the pad itself, you can see Falcon 9, the 2-stage rocket in white, topped off by the payload fairing 43-foot long that surrounds the IntelSat 35e spacecraft. Now, in the close-ups, you can see there are no recovery systems on the first stage. Their landing legs and grid fins were not installed at the launch site. So our coverage today will focus solely on the second stage as it heads into orbit. And we do plan to bring you mission coverage through spacecraft separation today. Now, we're currently at T-minus 6 minutes 47 seconds, continuing to count down on the Falcon 9. The good news is the SpaceX team working no issues. We have finished loading RP1 fuel onto both stages. We're continuing to load liquid oxygen onto both the first and second stage, as is typical. Now, a word on yesterday's abort. There is a normal guidance check in the countdown that's done at T-minus 10 seconds. And yesterday, we issued an automatic abort based upon some guidance data that looked to be out of family. We did further analysis shortly after launch, and a review of the vehicle showed that the guidance system and the flight vehicle were in good shape. We actually had a problem with the ground limits that we have since modified, so we should not see that same abort today. So everything on the Falcon 9 is looking good for an on-time launch in just a few minutes from now. The IntelSat 35e spacecraft is on internal power, working no issues. They're ready for launch. The range, air, and sea spaces are clear. And the weather, well, obviously we had to use up our hour window, but it looks like the weather has moved far enough away that we should get a launch attempt coming up in just over 5.5 minutes. Now for some information on the mission and capabilities of the epic IntelSat 35e spacecraft and system, we have a short video for you from our customer, IntelSat. T-minus 3 minutes, 43 seconds. Everything continues to count down towards an on-time launch at 35 minutes after the hour. We just heard in the background that the guidance nav and control team has verified that the problem that we saw yesterday that has the abort is not present today. Guidance system is looking good. We have begun retract of the strong back away from the second stage, pressurizing the vehicle so that we could open the clamp arms. The strong back will move about 1.5 degrees away from the vehicle, then move the rest of the way to the 77-degree launch position after we get liftoff and release of the Falcon 9. We're currently closing out propellant load on the first and second stage, and at this stage at T-minus 3 minutes, everything's continuing to look good. The next major activity after shutting down LOX loading onto the vehicle, you'll hear at T-minus 1 minute, the flight computer is going to start up, and that'll lead up to release of the Falcon 9 at T-minus 0 as we fly into space carrying the IntelSat 35e spacecraft. So we're going to listen with you as we go through the last minutes of the countdown sequence.
Stage 2 return manifold secured.
Strombeck lower has ended. Strombeck is at 88.5 degrees.
Stage 2 lock secured. Falcon 9 is on internal power. MOD defuel bleed complete. Vehicles in self-align.
Ground gas closeout has started.
Stage 1, Stage 2, cryosphere.
FTS announced AFTS is ready for launch.
AFTS is ready for launch.
Gas closeout is complete.
BC verify F9's in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup. Stage 1, Stage 2, press for flight.
LD verify go for launch.
Go for launch.
T-minus 30. T-minus 20.
Falcon 9 is configured for flight.
T-minus 10. Fed launch abort sequence.
John Innsbrucker again at SpaceX webcast desk here in Hawthorne, California. Again, we've had an abort at T-minus 10 seconds. The countdown has been stopped. We're waiting now as the team goes through the standard abort sequence. We don't know what the cause was. We're going to listen and see what we can bring back to you. Now, this was obviously, as we heard early in the countdown, as I reported, the problem that we saw yesterday was looking good. So we think the guidance, nav, and control problem from the day before has been fixed. But the team right now is going through their standard abort sequence that we typically use during static fires. That's not new for us. So we're going to listen for a moment and then try to come back with some more information. But as a reminder, we are at the end of the window today, so there will not be an opportunity to recycle and try to launch again later today. So let's go back to the countdown net for a few minutes and listen in.
CLC on countdown, we're proceeding to offloads.
Welcome back, John Innsbrucker again. We're still waiting for the launch director to give an update. Currently, the team is going through the safing procedure and stepping into the propellant offload steps. And we are continuing to protect a launch opportunity on tomorrow, the 4th of July. But we're waiting for just another minute or two to see if we can bring you any information about the hold itself before we end the webcast. So hang in there for another couple of minutes. We'll be back then with a final summary. Good afternoon, good evening again from the Hawthorne headquarters webcast desk for the Falcon 9 launch of IntelSat 35e. At this time, we still do not have definitive information on what caused the scrub at T-minus 10 seconds. As I mentioned earlier in the webcast, at T-minus 10 seconds, that's one of the points where we routinely check a lot of data on the vehicle to make sure that everything is good to go as close to launch as we can measure it. Now, as is typical, when you have something that causes a hold in the countdown, or in this case, a scrub for the day, the first pieces of data may actually not be, what you might want to call out as the cause of the hold. So that's where the SpaceX engineering team is going through, threading that information together. We have all the telemetry coming off of the rocket, so we've got plenty of information, but they're taking their time right now to understand what system they're really looking at that would be the cause of the hold. So you'll have to follow us on our social media sites as we get more information. Now, as a reminder, scrubbing at T-minus 10 seconds, not unusual. When we test fire the rockets in Texas or even at the launch site, we run an abort sequence, as it's called, so that we can safe the vehicle. We've already gone through that, and we have moved on into offloading propellant in order to protect another launch opportunity, possibly tomorrow, if the investigation allows it to proceed. At the same time, the spacecraft team, they're going back to external power. They're checking their systems, but they report no issues right now, so they would also be good to go for the moment. So that's going to wrap it up. We had an extended countdown today. We had to wait for the weather, and we got to T-minus 10 seconds before we had a hold. Once again, called by the automated abort criteria. We were not able to recycle because we were out of the window. So with that, our earliest launch opportunity, again, may be tomorrow, the 4th of July here in the United States, a great holiday, and we'll see whether or not we have a rocket that will be able to fly on that day. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody, thank our customer, IntelSat, the range, for being up today, and hopefully tomorrow to support us, the FAA on licensing, and you, the viewers, for watching along with us. That's going to end our webcast for today. Hopefully we'll be back on with you tomorrow. For now, have a good evening, and goodbye.
Okay, guys, so since they're obviously not going to be launching today, I think I'm going to go ahead and shut the stream off. So if you guys are watching and you haven't already subscribed, please do so. I will be streaming some Elite at my usual time tomorrow. But then I'm going to keep an eye out for tomorrow's launch time and webcast from SpaceX also. So I'll keep an eye out for everything, and we'll try this again tomorrow. So until then, guys, I will see you later.